Hello again. I'm glad you've come back for another chapter of Dangerous Journey. I'm Mr. Jim and want to thank Miss Carla, Miss Sally, Mr. Andrew, and Ms. Allison for working with me to bring this production to you. Boy, last week was pretty scary with that fight with Apollyon, but let's stop and think about all the things that have happened in case you haven't been reading this book along with me. So I'm going to go over and click on this to remind us that we're doing this with the permission of the publisher, Erdmann's Publishing. And like the color of my shirt, we're reminded that when there's a black page, it reminds us that this is a dream. It's not real. It's about a dream about a man named Christian who had a book that told him the truth. And the truth is that his city that is behind him is going to be destroyed. So he wanted to get away, but it was made very hard by this huge backpack, a burden, things that he did that he shouldn't have done and things that he didn't do that he should have done, that is on his back and weighing him down and making him sad. He told his family to come with him. Even as they slept, they didn't believe him. And so he started running away, and he came upon a person named Evangelist who helped him by saying, look for the narrow gate, the wicket gate, and follow the shining light. And so Christian ran and ran and ran. His neighbors chased after him. His family tried to call him back. The neighbors said, come back. Christian said, no. And one of the neighbors said, well, this is stupid. I'm going back. But one of the neighbors said, I'll go with you. And so as they walked along, Christian said all the good things, but then they suddenly fell into a boggy place, a muddy place called a slough. And they started sinking in it. Pliable, the neighbor, was able to swim, and he ran home. Christian was up to his neck in the stuff, and he couldn't get out because of that burden until help came along, and help pulled him out and got him on his way. Mr. Worldly Wise Man said, here, take this shortcut. I can show you people, I can tell you where there are people who will get that burden off your back if you just go up this little hill. But it was a monstrous hill. And Christian was really scared, but Evangelist showed up and said, Christian, you took the wrong path. You were lied to, and you wanted to believe that lie. And this is no good. So then Christian had to come along the path again. He found the path. He came to some people that didn't want his help. And then he came to a big door that would lead to the place, get him into the area where he could find that narrow gate. When some arrows came that were fired by the devil and his soldiers, and the man on the inside said, well, if you can go through the narrow gate, then you'll be able to find a place where that burden can come off. So quickly, Christian came upon this scary-looking place, and there were some scary things in it, like the dust of sin and the sin that choked him, but the people inside were able to cleanse it easily with some grace water. And this person was not watching and being careful. Turned out to be a university professor like me. So I really have to pay attention and make sure that I keep my eye on the straight and narrow path. Well, what happened was that these two people in armor were protecting the narrow gate, but a valiant man with a sword came and chopped at them, and so Christian was able to figure out he needed courage and got back on the narrow path, which led him to this place where there was an empty tomb, a grave, and when Christian walked under the shadow of that cross, his burden tumbled off his back. He was given beautiful clothing and a passport, a ticket into the heavenly city by three shining ones. And so he was so happy that he got back on the narrow path when couple people came across trying to use a shortcut. And Christian said, you shouldn't use a shortcut to get on the narrow path. And they said, but we've been doing that. My people have been doing that for years and years. It must be okay. And so they went along that narrow path for a while and came to a place where the road went 3 different ways. One of the strangers went to the left, the other went to the right, and both were very sorry because soon they were lost and never heard from again. Christian found that the narrow path was harder and harder and harder. He finally found a place where he could just pause for a little bit of rest. And he read some of the comforting things in that parchment, the piece of paper that was given to him by a Shining One. And when he woke up, he looked, he saw that there were people running down the hill. And he said, why are you running away? And the answer was, because there's lions ahead and they're going to get us and we're really scared and so we're going back. We can't stay on this path. Christian realized that he didn't have his parchment, though. He had lost it, so he had to go back down the hill and find it. He did, and then he had to keep going on his way past some lions, and the only way he could get past them was by staying on that lighted, narrow path, because the lions were in chains, and even though they tried very hard, they could not get him. The porter, the man at the other side of the path, said, come on in. There are women here who will help you if they like your story, and they did. And so Christian got some rest. But then he had to get ready for the most awful fight with Apollyon. But the ladies had things for him, a helmet and a breastplate to put across his chest, some special shoes that would never wear out, and a sword that would cut through anything, and a great shield that he could use in order to stop anything from hurting him. But then he faced Apollyon, who was actually the prince of that area, and Christian was supposed to be his subject. But Christian decided that he had to fight, and it was a terrible fight. And Apollyon got on top and was crushing Christian down, but Christian was at the last moment able to grab his sword and put it through Apollyon. So that brings us to chapter 5. It's called The Valley of the Shadow of Death. I saw in my dream that Christian now had to enter another valley, a very dark one, very lonely, no water, no one lived there, and it was so silent. And here Christian was even tested in worse ways than even his fight with Apollyon. 2 men suddenly ran out from behind some trees. Go back, go back! Why, what's the matter? Asked Christian. Matter? We were going the way you were going. We went as far as we dare. Oh, what did you see? Why, the valley itself, said the men. It's as black as pitch down there. The only sound's the howling of the bad people who've entered there, have never been able to find their way out. In a word, it's every bit dreadful, terrible, awful, and no order. This is the valley of the shadow of death. But Christian said, there's no other way to the celestial city, so I have to go. That may be, said the men, but we're out of here. They were waving their arms and running away. Christian went forward, his sword in hand, feeling his way step by step. For the path was exceedingly narrow. Oops. There it is. I've been going the wrong way, haven't I? Those are the 2 men, and this is the narrow path. Sword in hand, step by step. On the right was a very deep ditch into which many people had fallen, and they died. On the left, there was a marsh so dangerous that if you got sucked in, you would never be seen again. There was no bottom for his foot to stand on. It was all so dark that when Christian tried to avoid the march, he almost fell headlong into the ditch. He never knew whether his next step would be his last. Wait till you see what's next. He saw the light of a fire. He thought maybe the worst was over. Hey, some light to see by. This is better, but of course he was mistaken. For what he had seen was the very mouth of hell itself, and there were belching clouds of bad, terrible, awful-smelling smoke, which just added to how dark it was. The air was full of sad voices and the rush of wings, wings, wings. Ghosts. His trusty sword could not fight ghosts. Sometimes they brushed against him with such a force that he feared that they'd push him off the path and he would drop down into the pit and be lost forever. The rushings to and fro were heard by him several miles, till he could go no further and dearly wanted to go back. But then he thought, by now I may be halfway through this valley, and the danger of going back may be as great as the danger of going forward. So he went on. I will walk in the strength of the Lord God. And for a while silence fell about him once again. But not for long. It's never easy for Christian, is it? One of the wicked ones came up behind him. Now this might be a little scary, but here's another wicked one. Oh, that's so scary. Started whispering many bad things in his ear. Worried Christian. He might have easily fallen on his sword. At that moment, he thought he heard the voice of a man going before him, saying, Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Immediately, Christian took courage, and for 3 reasons. He gathered from these words that there were others in the valley who feared God beside himself. Number 2, he perceived that God was with them, and if he was with those other people, maybe he could be with him. He hoped to overtake those people and have their company. The day was dawning. He could look back, and by the light of the day he saw those hobgoblins and dragons of the pit, but they were now far off. And after daybreak, they would not come near. Then Christian, quoting from Scripture, said, He has turned the shadow of death into the morning. The sunrise brought another benefit for Christian, for though the first part of the valley was dangerous enough, the second part was unbelievably even more so. From the little hillock, the little hill where he stood, he could see the path, and that it had lots of traps, pitfalls, secret nets, so that if he'd been going through in the dark, he'd have been caught, and he would not have escaped dying, even if he had 1,000 lives. As it was, he once became entangled in a net, one of these, and only his trusty sword could free him. And twice a man-trap shutting him almost caught his leg, snapping at him. And time again he nearly fell to his destruction as the ground crumbled under him. Now comes some really scary stuff. I saw in my dream, just when he believed he was out of the valley, he came across a grisly sight indeed. A pile of skulls and mangled bones lying outside a cave. All that remained of pilgrims who had gone that way before. Even as he stopped to look at that cave, a sudden hand came out at him. It tried to seize him by the throat, but he leaped back just in time. Do you want to see what those skulls and bones look like? I'll show you in a moment, but I want you to know it's a pretty scary illustration. It seems 2 giants had lived there, both with a taste for pilgrims' blood. But one had now been dead for many years. The other, whose name was Pagan, though he was alive, was by reason of his age, he grew too stiff in his joints to venture very far. He could do little more than sit in the cave's mouth, biting his nails in frustration at not being able to grab the pilgrims passing by. So Christian came to no more harm and hurried on his way. And that's what Christian saw, and that's what the giant looked like there. Then On the path ahead of him, he saw a man who was running for his life. He recognized him as Faithful, that friend and neighbor that we heard about before, the same person that the porter at the Palace Beautiful had told him about. "Oh, there," he shouted, "wait till I catch up to you." But Faithful only ran faster, saying, "There's an avenger at my heels. I'm running for my life." He was half crazy still with fear after passing through that valley. In the end, Christian just summoned up all his strength and ran faster and faster and caught up to Faithful and reassured him. And as soon as they were walking together, lovingly telling each other their adventures, Faithful had escaped the slough, but a woman whose name was Wanton, who was nearly his undoing. Apollyon, however, he didn't even have to fight. Apollyon didn't see him, I guess. "How long, dear friend, did you stay in the city of destruction before you set off after me?" asked Christian. "Till I couldn't stay any longer," replied Faithful, "for there was great talk after you were gone that our city would in a short time be burnt to the ground with fire from heaven." "What? Did your neighbors say that?" "Yes, it was in everybody's mouth for a while. Everybody was talking about it." "And only you came out," Christian said, "to escape?" "Well, I don't think the others believed it," said Faithful. "And some of them said you were not real smart." So they went on talking, and that made the hours pass easily. Well, then all of a sudden, Faithful saw a man on the road ahead. "Who's there?" he cried, once more consumed with fear. "Hey," Christian said, "it's my good friend Evangelist." And it was. Evangelist had come. And, he comes and goes at strange times. Let's see what Evangelist had to say. Evangelist said, he pointed in the distance, "You will soon come to a town. You can see it there. It's called Vanity Fair. And in that town, you will have enemies." Then he added, "Be men. Commit your souls to God as to a faithful Creator, for one of you will die a painful death." One of you, Christian or Faithful, is going to die in that town. With that, Evangelist left just as suddenly as he had appeared. And Faithful and Christian looked at each other and said, "Which of us did he mean?" All they could do was go forward and find out. And so, if you want to find out what the town of Vanity looked like and what its fair was all about, I hope you will come back next week and join me for the next chapter of Dangerous Journey. Whoa, I just turned the page. I can see what's going to happen. Whoa, I hope you'll come back next week. Oh my. And remember, one of them will die. Have a good week. I love you, and I appreciate your staying with me all these weeks. Bye-bye.